Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for people to log in, and then we'll get started.
Welcome to today's session, aligning compensation with retention strategy, values, and employee expectations. We're going to kick it off with a round of introductions. I'm Andrew Tidwell. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for WineShipping.com LLC. Lori?
Hi, I'm Lori Simmons. I'm the Vice President of Compensation, Alignment, and Integration for Common Spirit Health.
Jared?
Hi, I'm Jared Elias. I am the Director of Total Rewards at Arizona State University.
And Matthew?
Hi, I'm Matthew Price. I'm the Senior Director of Global Compensation at Dawn Food Products in Jackson, Michigan.
Well, let's get into it. We have some questions that we prepared we want to talk about, and this thing will go wherever it goes. So I guess the first thing that I would put to the group would be, what best practices would you say you're using as you design incentive structures to make them competitive the way things are changing so fast in this market today?
I'll jump in first if you want. One of the things that we've done at Dawn is we've tried to look at our variable pay structures and driving them deeper in the organization. We're a family-owned organization. We're about 105 years old, and so we've been catching up on some things, and one of them is to try to drive our variable pay program deeper into the organization. This is something I wish we probably would have done pre-COVID, because we're doing it in a little bit of a reaction to some volatility in hourly pay that we're driving variable pay to more of our salaried team members in order to try to relieve some compression. And I think it would have been great if we had done that a little bit earlier. It wouldn't have been as reactionary, but we're driving the results and owning the results a little bit deeper into the organization.
Matthew, how do you budget for that?
It really was, to take a good look at those areas where we thought that people could drive performance, and so it made sense to put a bit of a bonus structure there. But it also was looking at it from a total compensation type development. So could we get a handle on some of the things on our fixed costs? Like, would we be able to control down the line salary budget increases on fixed costs by putting more in a variable pay on total comp? And so budgeting for it in that way is, obviously variable pay is on the if come. So if we have the results, we're going to pay this, and just budget based on our bonus program, which drives results to be, above target. It's a steeper curve above target, but just looking at how many additional people came onto the bonus program, but understanding that in the variable pay world, we're only really doing it if we get the results that are going to justify it. The other thing that we do is we make sure that our results are net of that variable pay outlay, so that our end results have to be at or above that target after we would make any payment. So that was important to our budgeting.
Self-funding, as it were.
Yep.
Valerie?
Well, we're sort of in an interesting situation right now because Common Spirit Health is a merger between two large healthcare organizations, and over the last, and it's fairly new, 4.5, 5 years. Over the last 2 years, we've got pretty much a completely new CEO, executive leadership team. So we're focusing right now on what's the philosophy, what's our strategy, what's our operational strategy, and then getting those things. We're like in process right now. Where do we want to head? How do we want to differentiate? So it's getting that philosophy, which is really our focus. And then deciding, okay, how do we then drill that down into our incentive program? And reevaluating, always reevaluating is this working? Is it different? Is it getting the results we want? Healthcare isn't new and innovative. I used to work in the high-tech industry, so it was very different. Industries are very different. And I'm kind of curious from the university perspective, Jared, like how you all look at that, because it might be similar. But yeah, it's really trying to focus right now on what's the strategy, what's the philosophy with this new leadership team.
I think that, like, from the perspective of ASU, we are redefining what the new American university is, and what a public research university is, and we're prioritizing things such as inclusivity and excellence. And our incentive structures reflect this commitment by rewarding the diverse contributions of our faculty and staff. In addition to that, we also utilize outside consulting groups to come in. We just completed a job architecture project as well, so that we can better align our positions with incentives and pay structures.
I'm curious, how do you tie incentives to diversity in the university?
It's difficult, and I think it really reflects like how you fill your position. I think it has a lot to do with like affirmative action plans, and with like who you're bringing into the institution, and by not sort of sidelining yourself. I think at ASU we do a very good job at being a diverse organization. We have different people from different backgrounds, different groups, different protected classes that work for the university in high-level positions. And I think that, like, once you do that and you sort of like get rid of any stereotypes and preconceived notions, then that's how you really drive it forward.
Laurie, you mentioned philosophy, sort of that strategy, and you're defining your philosophy to align your compensation principles to it. How has hybrid work affected the way that you think about compensation for folks that maybe don't work in the office or in a facility every day?
It doesn't really impact it at all. That's one of the things that that really has helped with our engagement, is that our remote workers or hybrid workers, there's no differentiation. The metrics are based on usually, hospital facility or region, so they're part of that. But obviously, the clinicians can't work from home, but the administrative folks can. And maintaining that and allowing that that ability to work from anywhere, essentially, is a huge satisfier. And we haven't seen any negative impact from that at all. So it doesn't impact whether someone's eligible or not eligible. Everybody's eligible. It falls into the right categories.
Sure. You seem aligned with that, Matthew. Is that your view?
It certainly is for our business. Our business is very much based in a few manufacturing sites and distribution sites, and so a large number of our team members are working on site. We certainly have some hybrid and remote, but we didn't have the same effect that we heard about in, say, the high tech industries, right, where so much of the work could be done remotely, and so you had people that were moving away from high cost of living areas and being able to do their jobs from other places, and organizations, and particularly in the high tech world, started saying, do we need to pay them the same if they're living elsewhere? That's not something that has affected us as much. We have hybrid and remote work, but we haven't done any differentiation based on where they are. Our pay structure is a national pay structure. We haven't gone into differentials. We look at hourly pay based on local market, but every location that we have has a pay structure based on their local market for the hourly positions. But we've not done anything with regards to, say, geographic differentials. Some of that is we haven't had a big need for it. Some of it is we've explored the option, and we have some limitations on the technology side within our systems as to being able to administer it without constantly being in a maintenance mode. But it hasn't affected our business as much.
Well, upgrades and ranges, I think, are constantly under maintenance. You know what I mean? It's like road construction.
Absolutely.
Jared, what's the view from a higher learning standpoint?
So being a university, we are budget constrained often when it comes to compensation, but we do try our best to align compensation with the location the employee is living in. We have employees in nearly 48 different states, as well as around the world. So even though we're based in Arizona and Arizona State University, we really are sort of like a global organization. And it's very interesting because it's very difficult. And what we like to say is use the term one university, many places. And I think that defines like us trying to be fair across the board and trying to be competitive with the market. But also, obviously, I think a big stumbling block that we run into are the budget constraints, which make it kind of difficult, but it also makes it interesting and fun to try and navigate.
So I'm pleased to hear your answers, because it's very much the way that we consider it at Wine Shipping. We also have multiple locations across the country, obviously for shipping lanes, right? And we kind of look at it, talent's worth what it's worth, whether you're in the office or you're not in the office. And we do consider geographies. We have two sets of grades and ranges based on higher cost metropolitan areas and, more standard geographies. That's how we look at it. So there's been, a lot of legislation recently, or things that we've been hearing about that have actually come into practice about pay transparency. How are you dealing with those things in your organizations? Jared, you went last.
Sounds good. For us, pay transparency is sort of like a natural thing that we've been doing for quite a while. And all our salaries are published. They're available in the Arizona Republic, which is a local newspaper here. They do a report on the pay within the university. So it's public knowledge. But as far as like positions go and stuff like that, we are very transparent. We're busy going through sort of like with our career architecture, a bit of a redesign due to the implementation of Workday HRIS system. And part of that is we're looking at those structures as well.
Sure. Lori?
Well, we have facilities in 21 states, but people in many more. And since we're trying to attract candidates and we can do remote work, we chose to implement the pay transparency feature across all of our locations. So even those without that legislation, even those states that don't have that, we said, look, as an organization, when we post, we're going to be transparent with our pay ranges in all states that we're in. And initially we had some leaders going, why are we doing that? It's not required here. But what we have found is that it actually is attracting more candidates. And we're finding that candidates won't apply if they don't know what the pay range or pay opportunities are. And so, we just decided to take that approach of, it's best to be transparent. And our employees already, have the ability to know what their pay ranges were during the merit process. Posting was something a little different, but we haven't found any negative things. Jared, I'm smiling when you say you're implementing Workday. We're actively looking at that right now. So, it's interesting to think about what you have to do if you implement something new.
Workday is a beast in itself, and we've been going through the implementation for nearly 2 years now. We're going live in 2025, January 2025. So we're in the middle of the project. We've been using the Huron consultants for it, so it's been good.
Okay.
At Dawn, we took a similar approach to you, Lori. When legislation came out, we said, all right, we're just going to put the pay grade and the pay range for every job that we post, no matter where it is that we're posting. And we went into it full force. We probably maybe should have taken a second to put a little bit more thought into it, because one of the things anecdotally that we have seen is that as we have had candidates that are pleased to see these numbers, but what we're finding is requests for salaries that are anecdotally, we haven't done a full examination of it, much higher than what we were prior to posting all of these. And what we actually posted the full pay range. And what we're considering now is, do we pull that back to sort of a good faith, here's what we would be looking to hire in, as opposed to putting the full pay range, because we're seeing some very high requests that are somewhat difficult to fit from an internal equity perspective. And that has happened since we started posting full pay ranges for all of the positions. So in retrospect, we might want to pull it back a little bit to where we say, 75% of the range penetration is the top that we're looking at. Now, we may run into something where we have somebody that's very, very qualified and seems to be a great talent that we might go outside of that. But where we would good faith be looking, to hire is a move that we may be making shortly, because we've just seen huge requests within the jobs with resumes that don't justify it. And I'm not saying anything bad about candidates coming in, but what they're looking for is unreal. And in your head, there's so much legislation on what you can ask them and what you can't ask them. You kind of are wondering, are they shooting for the moon and hoping to get halfway there, right? So that's something that we've run into. Dawn is a family-owned company and is over the years been very, one of the things they love is being able to be very private about so many things. So pay transparency is a little bit of a tough thing to bridge. We're making some moves to be much more contemporary, and I think that pay transparency is going to be something over the next 5 years that we're going to see big changes here, not just on job postings, but people's ability to see full pay structures may come along, that sort of thing. The question we always ask ourselves is, with all these job postings and a listing of what grade it is, and here's what the grade, how many people are piecing together, how many people internally are going out to job postings and piecing together the pay structure themselves, to the point where we might as well just put the pay structure out there for everybody to see. But it's baby steps a little bit with a family-owned company that's been largely very, very private in what it does over the years.
I think that I can resonate with that, because I came from the private sector to the public sector. And what I find is that there's a lot more, should I say, will on the part of a public sector employee to have pay transparency than a private sector employee. But I've also noticed the positive effects that has on the workforce, on employee morale, and on the ability to recruit employees, because you're having a honest, direct conversation in the interview, rather than sort of guessing, what is this person, are they going to accept my offer? They're not going to accept my offer.
That's fair. In any employee survey, satisfaction or whatever, even the highest scores across the board, whenever you ask somebody, how do you feel about your compensation? It could be more, right? No matter who you ask. So with all the increases, such as the ones that you were talking about, Matthew, we've seen wages go up since the pandemic. How do you deal with that as you're being competitive and it causes compression? You mentioned that in your earlier answer.
Yeah, and I mentioned I would have loved to have done some things with variable pay for our salaried people before the pandemic, so we could have created a bit of room, if you will. I don't think anybody anticipated necessarily the volatility, particularly in the hourly pay market and the labor force. People looking for those jobs shrinking so much, to the point where you have 100 jobs available and there's only 38 people that are looking to fill them. You really are going a little bit crazy with hourly pay, and it's not sustainable. You have to do something else. So I wish we would have done some things with variable pay to sort of preemptively relieve some compression that ultimately came. One of the things that we did as we were evaluating hourly pay through the pandemic, and even before, we saw we have a lot of drivers. Truck drivers that work for Dawn, and we saw some problems in the market there even before the pandemic. And what we started to do was evaluate the market at each of our locations and make sure that when we were modeling what we wanted to pay, we were doing it in a way that didn't negatively impact the people that were already with Dawn. And so we actually worked with an outside consultant and kind of went through some best practice stuff, removed some things that were always here. So we always had wage progression for new team members in an hourly role. We removed that. So, it might be you come in, you get a certain wage, and then 60 days later you get an increase, and it was kind of going through a bit of a probationary period. We removed that and made it entirely merit-based. We removed anybody coming in to our organization with prior experience. It didn't matter from an hourly perspective. If you came in, you started at an hourly wage. And we thought that might have some effects on what we were able to get. But it was more important, we found it was more important that our starting hourly wage was very competitive, and that people were treated fairly. We don't have a formal performance management system for our hourly team members. And so what we did was very fair, very objective. And we found that we started by making sure we were being competitive and even ultra competitive a little bit in some markets. We were able to get people coming in, even though they were starting at a hiring rate with some experience.
Sure. How do you deal with compression, Lori?
It's a good question. Well, again, limited funding. We're in healthcare, and you have to look at it, and it depends. That's the question. That's the answer. Is it depends, right? We're facing a lot of compression issues right now with the change in the minimum wages, especially on the West Coast. In Washington, California's just implemented a $23 an hour healthcare minimum wage. So in June, everybody's going up to a minimum of $23. And so what do you do? What can you do? We've also got the issue of representation. So we have a heavy unionized force on the West Coast, and that's always pushing and compressing on the non-union wages. So it's, you have to be really careful about it. Sometimes, what can you afford? What do you have to do? What can you afford? What's the repercussion? We're in the process of evaluating that right now with this new healthcare minimum wage. I think one of the most important things you can do is the communication and education around compensation. When these new wage legislations are coming down the pipeline, we've got to let our employees know. You think they know, but they don't always know that this is not something that our company chose to do. This is new legislation, just like an increase in minimum wage. We have to do this. We have to fund this first. We don't have a choice. And so communicating and helping them understand also what their total rewards is if you can't do compression, reminding them of those things. But it's hard. We're in the midst of it right now. And, we're trying to align new regions. There's a lot of moving parts. And it's just always keeping your eye on it and trying to budget ahead, for what might happen the next year. But it's, just having, as most of you know, or as all of you know, because you have folks in California, it's challenging to have a lot of people in California and even just along the West Coast. Like I see it more there, a few pockets on the East Coast, but those changes in legislation are rough. And so how do you take a look at it? What are your critical positions? Where is the compression the most glaring? Can you do something for everyone? I mean, it's a question I don't have a solid answer to, besides, we continue to evaluate and reevaluate. And I think communication, again, is huge.
It's a tough one for sure.
I think, yeah, and I think that from our perspective as a university, it's difficult to deal with because you've had employees that are so tenured with the university, like 30 years or so, and then you come into that looking at like, how do you get paid to be equitable when they've probably been receiving their merit increase year over year, but that has really kept up with inflation and kept up with everything else that employees have to sort of deal with. And what we do here is we try and like incorporate that into regular reviews, adjustment to salary structures, promotion opportunities, and performance-based compensation, so that we can really try and like sort of address that in a way that rewards those who sort of deserve to be rewarded.
So at Wine Shipping, most of our employees are in California on the West Coast, and then we have a lot in the state of New York. So two very highly regulated areas. And what we do is we typically do budget and adjustment also for tenured employees whenever we do an across the board increase for competitive reasons to avoid compression, that very thing. So, variable pay has come up quite a bit. What are some things that you make sure are a part of your, I don't want to overuse the term best practice, but what are some components of your variable pay programs that you think are important to share?
I think something that's important is, and communications is huge, is making people that are in a variable pay program understand how they move the needle, that they do have a stake in driving those results. And that was when we made the decision to at one point we had only variable pay for a certain pay grade and above. And when we made the decision to go to the rest of the salaried pay grades, one of the questions that came up was, are we putting enough out there for them to feel like they move the needle? And do they have a reason to try to move the needle? Because this is something that they're going to feel the effects of, hopefully the positive effects of. And that was definitely part of the build. So I think it's very important. Call it line of sight or whatever it is that you want to call it. But the idea that what a person is doing is important to the end result from a variable pay perspective, and that they have a reason to change behaviors, right? If what they're doing currently, is contrary to what we're trying to get to. If I'm telling somebody, they can earn something if we get to a certain result and it's not worth their time, then they're not going to change the behavior that drives that result. So I think it's very important that they feel, A, that they have a line of sight, and B, that there's enough, it sounds cliche, enough skin in the game to change their behavior to drive that result.
You said line of sight, and that's a principle that line shipping we use very much, is that as much as possible, we make the programs within the person's line of sight so that they feel like they can control it and have an impact on the outcome. I've also heard the principle, keep it simple. And from where I sit, one size just doesn't fit all. So if we have multiple incentive, variable pay programs, it's fine as long as they're tailored to the work that folks are doing in different places. For example, in the warehouses where we're actually putting wine in boxes and shipping it out the door, the hourly employee's bonus plan is exactly the same as the general manager's bonus plan. So they're all completely aligned. And when I talk about these things, it means something to both groups. For folks that work in the administrative section, it's a little bit different and it's funded a different way, but we explain it to them, that way. But line of sight, of course, whenever possible. And then we communicate throughout the year. What's our progress? What are we tracking to?
Yep.
People have very short memories sometimes about those things.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, man.
Oh, sorry. I think that from our perspective, variable pay is also very different in a university setting, whereas there are some positions that are performance based, but sometimes it's hard to quantify and qualify. And I think that it's something where we try and make sure that any variable pay opportunities are in alignment with our goals as an organization, and that they're very clear and measurable objectives to the pay program. And also just making sure that there's transparency and communication, I think, is extremely important.
How about in healthcare, Lauren?
Yeah, I think, the same thing. It's looking at what are we trying to incent, and how well are we communicating it, and how often. You mentioned those regular updates, Andrew, letting the team know this is where we are against our goals and metrics. And Matthew, you mentioned too that, you have these thresholds, and this is for real. This is variable pay. So we want to get, higher and higher into those ranges so that you can get a higher payout. But I think the communication to the group as a whole and tying in what is my performance and how is that impacting a goal and the metric is so key. That and communication, and then reevaluating. Just because something has worked for 3 or 4 years doesn't mean it's going to work for the next 3 or 4, or it might. But I think taking a step back and reevaluating is this the right plan? Every few years. It doesn't have to be necessarily every year. You might want to tweak your metrics, but just, the industry changes and your finances and your economic outlook change, so aligning all of that, it's a lot, especially, in larger organizations or organizations where you're crossing, state lines and that sort of thing. So I think those are really key pieces.
And evaluating what maybe doesn't work. So a couple of it, so
Right.
at Dawn for a long time, our key account team, these are the people that are dealing with the Paneras and the McDonald's and the 7-Eleven, right? We're on the standard our standard Dawn bonus plan, and operationally we were doing great, but we weren't getting where we needed to get with key accounts. So in a way, it felt like they were riding the coattails a little bit. So we built an incentive plan specifically for key account, and it was difficult, but essentially the message was, we need you guys, we're going to grow, we need this team to be exceeding their targets. So here's an incentive plan that it was a little bit difficult barrier to entry, because what we had been doing wasn't good enough. And so it was not we're looking to pay on the same results, we were looking to drive results. So we put a specific incentive plan that is very lucrative if they do right, if the key account team does right by Dawn. Now, on the other side, one of the things that we did, and this was a big thing for Dawn, was put in a digital presence for our customers. We were, bakery is a very archaic industry. And so a disruptor for us was putting in an app that our customers by number are mostly mom and pop bakery shops, right? The place you get your donuts in the morning. And so we put in a digital ordering system, and hand in hand with that was telling our sales reps, listen, we don't want you taking orders anymore. They can go on the app and they can do their orders. We want you building relationships. And our sales reps, our street sales reps, were 100% commissioned. And what we said to them is, what if we were to build your compensation where there was a base element of it, a guaranteed element of it, because we want you spending your time building relationships with your customers, going through the trends with them, telling them what's going to be good for their business. So we completely changed the plan for those, what we call market sales reps, to the point where they had a base. So they were spending time and not just popping into the store and saying, hey, same thing as last week. Okay, I'm out of here. We put a salary in place and then put an incentive plan on top of that to get the rest of it. And it's been very successful.
Something like incentive for driving app use versus taking orders.
There's some of that. There's some on new customer acquisition, that sort of thing. Yeah, there was some to drive digital use. Where it was really, some of it was just teaching them how to use the app. The digital presence has been very successful for us.
Yeah, when I got to Wine Shipping, we had one bonus plan. Now we have 6, just for what you're talking about.
Yep.
Because if I'm in McMinnville, Oregon, right, and we're doing fulfillment there, and somehow corporate EBITDA doesn't hit the target, I'm completely demotivated, perhaps in April. So we need to change some of those things. And for any regulators watching this, all of our bonus programs are completely discretionary.
I was gonna ask the question when you mentioned hourly bonus programs. Are they completely discretionary, or do you have to do all the things on the payroll side to recalculate for purposes of overtime? But Lori, getting back to what you said, reevaluating is so important, because it's not, hey, does this continue to work? But is there something that's absolutely not working? And that's how we ended up completely changing what we did on the key account side.
We wouldn't be current and hip if we didn't talk about AI, right? So what are we doing with AI related to compensation?
I think that, like, when it comes to compensation, AI is just as important as it is in any other piece of business. And ASU, we're very innovative, and we are using AI. We are looking for new ways to use AI, and it really you have to utilize the cutting edge technologies to really optimize your compensation strategies, and to really go do the research, because there's so much that can be done now with AI as far as research goes, as far as looking at different salary bands, as far as putting together compensation plans. I think that the world's your limit when it comes to AI, and it's a matter of setting setting our goals and the organization's goals, and then really driving forward those goals through the utilization of artificial intelligence.
Lori, are you using AI with regard to compensation or any other part of human resources?
Yeah, I mean, from the compensation or HR perspective, I think that one of the biggest places we're starting to use it, and we're looking at implementing it, is in the job description arena, writing those job descriptions. And I think there's some really cool technology out there that I've seen from a couple of different vendors that takes that busy work out of creating the job description, and not only creating something from scratch, but also taking, we're a huge organization that's merged, so we have more than enough job descriptions that we're trying to consolidate and align across the organization. They can take all of those things and feed them into the AI system and consolidate it and spit out a new job description that incorporates all the key features from all these various different job descriptions. And, as we all know, writing and aligning job descriptions is a lot of work. It's really, really important. It's what you base your compensation pay from. So I think that it's going to be helpful to have this opportunity to start implementing and using that. We haven't quite implemented it yet, but we've done a lot of research on it, and I think the functionality is really cool. We're still doing a lot of the basic comp stuff, not using AI, and we use different, market pay and those types of apps or systems, but haven't really gone much further down that AI path.
I can't think of much, something much more boring than trying to over a series of acquired companies. So we use AI too to kind of get us started, the framework. But we've also found that it's really important not to have it spit out some sort of, sterilized job description. We want our culture to be reflected in anything that we put out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a thoroughness standpoint, AI has been helpful, but it hasn't yet replaced the need for our intervention to sort of put our stamp on it.
Yeah, Andrew, I think it's great that you bring that up. Just yesterday, I was able to sit in on a webinar that was talking about AI and talking about ethical use and some different things in HR. And it was called HR at the Table was the name of the group that put it on. And one of the things that it talked about was that there is some fear of AI out there, and what we have to remember is that there's always a human element to AI. And when organizations are implementing AI, they have to take into account their culture. And what AI is going to, as you said, it could whitewash some things out of that you want in, whether it be a position description or even how the employee experience happens. And so it was important that when people are implementing AI, they recognize, is the AI going to provide an experience that people are going to want to use? That has to be important. So, as an example, in total rewards, I report to the VP of total rewards here, and what we're looking at doing is a bit of a shared services and being able to take, we get a lot of benefits and payroll calls. We'd like to be able to put AI in place, and we've been talking to some vendors to handle some of the easier calls there so that our team, we have limited resources, as does everybody, can concentrate on those things that are going to involve a little more time and really are going to get employees to say, wow, it's really valuable that benefits is helping me out. And the reason we're able to do that is because maybe 40% of our calls can be handled by AI. But those 40% have to be well handled, because if we're not able to do that correctly, then the whole thing, just kind of blows up, and people are going to say, well, I don't want to use AI at all. I didn't get my question answered. It was a bad experience, whatever it was. But this was a central point of this webinar I was on yesterday, was talking about how it's important that human involvement is in the build of AI, and that the culture of your organization and what your people expect from an employee experience perspective is taken into account.
Well, yeah, there's a generational aspect of it too. So, for example, I expressed frustration with a cable company that won't be named getting stuck in a AI customer service loop. And my nephew was like, it didn't faze him at all. He's like, oh, no, let me show you what you do here. And he kind of showed me, and we got to a different place. And I was like, oh, wow. So the view that he had of it was different than the view that I have of it, to your point about quality. Yes, Jared.
I think that from our perspective, we're actually implementing AI in total rewards to receive documentation from employees, and then analyzing the documentation and filing the documentation. So we've traditionally had an individual devoted to that. And by employing AI, we're then able to expand the skills of that employee who was basically there filing electronic files. And we're also able to respond to the messages as soon as they come in, and acknowledge the receipt of the message. And if there's something missing, the AI bots actually look at it and will send an email back saying, hey, you submitted a live event, but you didn't submit a marriage certificate with it, or you didn't submit a birth certificate with it, and stuff like that. So for us, I think it's been very innovative, And it's also it's, like we talk about innovation, but I really think that like AI is here and organizations have to embrace it, and you have to do it in a way that also doesn't instill fear in your employees as well. I think that that's very important.
One of the exciting things we've talked about is being able to use AI when we have people who we've started using it with talent acquisition for things like you're talking about, Jared, being able to read documents and that sort of thing. But can we then take that to the next step of being able to identify people in the organization based on a profile that we have or their background or whatever, to identify career pathing opportunities, or to identify, if we want to put trainings out, who should be at these trainings? Can we put AI in place to help us identify those, and then ultimately design the career pathing, design the trainings that go with these people. So it's very exciting. In comp, haven't done it as much. I'm waiting for everybody we submit data to completely AI all their data submissions, so we don't have to spend a bunch of time on that. That would be glorious, but I haven't fully seen it yet.
We've talked about a lot. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground today, and one of the things we discussed more than once was compression and competitiveness, that kind of thing. What non-monetary parts of your recognition and comp programs are being successful? Because we can't just drive wages up forever and ever and ever.
I'll start on that one. So we're a couple of years into a recognition platform, and this came from a survey of our team members that said one of the things Dawn doesn't do well is recognition. And so it was a question of, okay, do we try to communicate that this is important and try to get people to recognize people, or do we give them the tools to recognize people in conjunction with a communication about why this is important? And so we actually have worked with a group called AwardCo. Some of you may have heard of it. It's essentially a social media platform. We now have it in the US, Canada, and Europe and AMIAP, and Latin America is the last place that we need to push the platform to. But like I said, it's very social media looking. It's aligned with our values, and we do constant communications to the organization as a whole. We do targeted communications to locations where we see a little bit less usage. There's a monetary side in that there are points, and people can use these points to purchase things. The platform is tied to Amazon, and I'm not trying to do a plug for AwardCo, but it's been very, very well received. But there's also non-monetary, a shout out. We call it a shout out program to anybody that is on the platform, and that's hourly salaried. Anybody can give a shout out to anybody else that's on the platform. So if you're sitting there working next to somebody on one of our lines and they're doing something that's covering you because something happened for you, you can go out there and give a shout out. It goes on a public feed. You can do it privately, but it's been very well received, and we've seen it in the survey. That thing that first came up, that we're not very good at recognition, has significantly improved, and part of it was just putting a tool in place that people are very familiar with. It looks an awful lot like a Facebook or an Instagram or anything like that, or Workplace. If any of you are on that, we've actually integrated it with our Workplace feed. So when things go on AwardCo, they also go over to our Workplace feed. So recognition has been big for us.
Matthew, is that something that people can access outside of the company's network, like on an app or something?
Yeah, it actually, it's not an app like from the App Store. It's what they call a progressive web application. But yeah, there is an app, and then there's a Dawn website that's not just the intranet. You can access it from any computer. You go out to that website, you log in, and you can access it there. But certainly you can on the phone. Yep, and we've started putting links to it on people's electronic payroll advice, right? So that they can go out to it that way as well.
Right on.
We when it comes to that, we have something called a Sun Award, where any employee can recognize any employee, and we find that to be very effective, because you can give those shout outs for the simplest thing that somebody has done. And as well, like when we look at like non-monetary rewards, we have things such as our tuition program, our tuition reimbursement, which is extremely popular amongst our employees, and I think it drives. I'm convinced that it helps drive our retention. Like our turnover rate is ridiculously low at like 13%.
That's a big benefit for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest non-monetary things that we do is allowing that remote work. Not bringing that back in as other companies are pulling people back into the office, is allowing them to stay remote. We have a pretty robust wellness program. and an EAP program. And then one of the other things that we're really starting to focus on due to our employee engagement surveys is looking at development opportunities for our employees. They really want that career growth, that opportunity. So how can we do that not only in promotions, but stretch opportunities and those sorts of things. So we just recently got a new learning and org development VP, and they're off and running with some of those programs. I think that's really important because, you know, even as employees go, okay, I understand where budget, you know, constraints are there and we can't get a lot of, you know, increases or promotions. What else can you do? I want to grow, excuse me, my career, my opportunities. And so how can we help them with that and retain that? And so I think that's really important. And that's something that I'm excited. I'm in the compensation. I'm not even in the org development, but I love that training and development aspect of things.
Andrew, one of the things we've also added is what we call employee interest or employee support groups, where we've put a few things out there. One of the big ones that's been really good is a women in leadership program, and it's they put on a number of very good webinars. They have put some of our team members through leadership training, and it's just other opportunities. As you said, Lori, for development, we've put together a group that is about the multi-generational workforce, and just how we all work together better with, you know, so many generations in the workforce now. So that is something very new to Dawn, but again, well received from an employee experience perspective.
So at Wine Shipping, our values are we call them our stands. What do we stand for? And they're real simple: unity, simplicity, and fun. And we have worked really hard in the last year or so to get the voice of everybody who works here. It's really easy to get, you know, the salaried folks and that kind of thing. But then what about the folks that are working in the warehouses and the far-reaching place? So we've used a tool called WorkStep that polls people at different times. And we found that to be really, really useful. And on the strength of some of the responses, we actually made a company policy that if you apply for a job as an internal candidate, you get an interview and you get feedback within 1 week. If you're not selected for the job, if you do get selected, well, you know, that's career progression at its finest right there. So I think we're getting close to the end of our time. I want to thank everybody for joining and for being here. Lots of good perspectives, and I think some practical things that folks can take and use. We're going to be doing a virtual Q&A session in the Connex community. So if you have a question, please submit that to Connex@connexpartners.com. Thanks, everyone.